I really don't care what happens to her at all. I don't care. Like everybody they tiptoe around with this social media, but what y'all don't get is that it be real consequence for y'all little flexes, y'all quick flexes for $300 that you need. It be consequence.
The night started out like any other, calm, casual, and unremarkable. Friends had gathered, music played in the background, and laughter filled the air. It was one of those evenings that didn't seem destined to be remembered, the kind you enjoy in the moment but never expect to be retold. Yet what unfolded within a few hours would turn that quiet night into something unforgettable, leaving those who witnessed it stunned and fans across the country in disbelief. Once word began to spread, at the center of it all were three people, whose lives have often been tangled together in both love and conflict: Iman, Shumpert, Aaron, and Teyana Taylor. What was supposed to be a simple, ordinary evening spiraled into chaos, ending with police intervention, shattered trust, and a flood of questions that still linger without clear answers. At first, the atmosphere was lighthearted, almost idyllic. Iman and Aaron were standing near one another, talking casually. There was nothing out of the ordinary in the way they spoke, no hint of anger or bitterness, no visible tension in their voices. Friends drifted in and out of the conversation, nodding along, laughing when something amusing was said. For a while, it was just two men exchanging words in the middle of a normal night. But then came a comment seemingly casual, light on the surface, but sharp enough to strike a nerve. Maybe it was poorly timed. Maybe it was more pointed than it appeared. Whatever the reason, it rubbed Iman the wrong way, and the shift in his demeanor was immediate. The air grew heavier, the energy in the room shifted, and the easy chatter that had filled the space only moments before began to dissolve. Those who had been nearby sensed it instantly. What had been friendly banter turned into raised voices. A light disagreement took on the shape of confrontation. Tempers, which had seemed non-existent only minutes earlier, flared unexpectedly. Jokes no longer landed. The atmosphere grew dense with tension. And in the middle of it all was Teyana, trying desperately to de-escalate what was quickly becoming something more than just words. She moved between them, her voice steady but urgent, reminding them that the evening was supposed to be fun, not hostile. But her pleas didn't land. They only underscored how far gone the situation already was, because neither man seemed able to pull back from the edge. To understand how things reached this point, it's important to consider who these people are and what they carried with them into that room. Iman Shumpert isn't just anyone. He's a former NBA player, a man with charisma and a reputation for being smooth, likable, and level-headed. Fans admired not only his basketball skills but his personality off the court, his confidence and charm. But lately, those closest to him had noticed a change. The pressures of personal struggles, uncertainty about what came next in his professional life, and the emotional weight of his very public relationship history seemed to weigh him down. Stress like that doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it simmers beneath the surface until it finds the wrong outlet, exploding in ways that surprise even the person carrying it. Then there's Aaron. He may not always make the front pages of tabloids, but he's no stranger to drama. Bold, outspoken, and unafraid of confrontation, Aaron is the kind of man who wears his emotions openly. His blunt honesty can be refreshing in moments when people crave realness. But in heated situations, that same trait can feel like gasoline tossed onto a flame. When Aaron and Iman clashed that night, it wasn't just about the words exchanged in that moment. It was about everything unsaid, everything unresolved, and maybe even resentments that had been quietly building for months. And in the middle of it all was Teyana Taylor. She's not simply a supporting character in this story, she is a powerhouse in her own right. A singer, actress, dancer, and creative force, Teyana has spent years carving out her own identity, proving she is more than just the partner of a celebrity athlete. But no matter how strong, composed, or independent a person is, moments like this test limits. That night, she was not simply a bystander watching two men argue. She was caught in the middle, pleading with both of them to stop tearing into each other before it went too far. At first, she tried the gentle approach, reminding them both that this wasn't worth it, that the night was supposed to be enjoyable, that whatever sparked the tension wasn't serious enough to risk things escalating. But her words didn't register. It was as if the sound of her voice couldn't penetrate the anger rising between them. Pride and respect became the battleground. The original comment, whatever it was, no longer mattered. What mattered now was who would back down, who would lose face, who would admit defeat. In that room, in that heated moment, neither man was willing to give an inch. The argument grew louder, sharper, more physical. It started with shouting, but quickly escalated into pushing, into gestures that made those nearby freeze with uncertainty. No one wanted to intervene too aggressively, but everyone could feel the explosive energy in the air. Teyana's heart raced as she moved back and forth between them, trying to create distance, trying to remind them of their humanity, their history, their reputations. But it was like shouting into a storm. They were locked into their own battle, too consumed with proving themselves to recognize how close they were to letting things spiral out of control. It was in that moment that Teyana realized the situation had crossed a line. This was no longer just an argument, no longer just a clash of egos. This was dangerous. Someone could get hurt. And if it continued, it wouldn't just be bruised pride or harsh words left behind, it would be real damage, maybe even something irreversible. With her hands trembling, she reached for her phone and made the call no one ever wants to make. Within minutes, the distant sound of sirens cut through the night, drawing closer and closer until they pierced the thick tension inside that room. The arrival of the police was like a bucket of cold water thrown on a fire, sudden and jarring. Officers moved quickly, separating the two men before fists could fly or worse could happen. The fight was over, but the silence that followed was deafening. The once lively room had fallen into a stunned quiet, everyone frozen in disbelief at how fast everything had escalated. Teyana, shaken and emotional, struggled to explain what had happened. Her voice cracked as she spoke, caught between relief that no one had been seriously injured and heartbreak that things had even reached this point. She had wanted to prevent exactly this outcome, but she also knew that her choice to call for help had been the right one. Without her intervention, the night might have ended much worse. News of the incident spread quickly. Within hours, fans across social media were dissecting every detail they could find, offering theories, judgments, and defenses. Some sided with Iman, arguing that he had been pushed too far. Others supported Aaron, claiming his blunt honesty had been unfairly misinterpreted. But nearly everyone agreed on one thing: Teyana had been placed in an impossible position. She was forced to choose between letting the fight continue unchecked or stepping in and risking the humiliation of making it public. And in that moment, she had chosen safety over silence. The days that followed did not bring much clarity. Instead, the speculation grew louder. Could Iman and Aaron reconcile after such a public and explosive clash? Or had the fight driven a permanent wedge between them? What did this mean for Teyana moving forward? And how would she carry the weight of being the one who stepped in? For while the argument had technically been between two men, she was the one who carried the heaviest emotional burden that night. She was the one whose voice cracked on the phone with police, whose tears marked the end of what had once been a joyous evening, whose strength kept things from going too far. Some critics questioned whether she should have acted sooner, whether the fight might have been prevented entirely had she intervened at the very first sign of tension. But most people acknowledged that her decision to call for help may have saved more than just reputations. It may have saved lives. The truth is, even the closest bonds can unravel when emotions run too high. It doesn't matter how deep the history goes or how strong the connection once was, anger and pride can destroy it all in an instant. That night was proof of that. It showed just how fragile relationships can be when unresolved feelings and unspoken grievances finally boil over. But it also revealed something else, something equally important. True strength isn't always about standing your ground or fighting through chaos. Sometimes it's about recognizing when things have gone too far, when the only option left is to step back, to walk away, or to call for help. In that moment of chaos, Teyana embodied that strength. She may not have been able to stop the fight entirely, but she ensured it didn't destroy everything. Without her intervention, the night might have ended with broken bones, bloodshed, or headlines far darker than the ones that ultimately emerged. Instead, what remains is a painful memory, a cautionary tale, and a reminder of how quickly things can spiral out of control. The lingering question now is whether Iman and Aaron will ever find a way to move past this, or if the rift will only deepen. Will pride keep them from reconciliation, or will time soften the anger that exploded so suddenly that night? As for Teyana, Perhaps this will mark the moment she steps back from the turmoil around her, choosing instead to focus on her own peace, her own strength, and her own future. Because in the end, she proved that even in the darkest moments, even when chaos surrounds you, it's possible to act with courage and clarity. What happened that night will not be forgotten anytime soon. It wasn't just a fight. It was a lesson, a harsh, unforgettable lesson about how fragile relationships can be, how quickly tempers can ignite, and how one explosive moment can change the course of everything.